Hey folks, this is Paul talking about A Course in Miracles. To forgive is to overlook. There's a very important aspect to forgiveness that overlooks. And this morning I pulled up about 20 quotes that specifically talk about overlooking, and every one of them was talking about looking literally past something and seeing the truth beyond something that you were looking past, whether it be that you're looking past the body or looking past the world or whatever. That forgiveness overlooks things, and that kind of means fails to see. That my vision would go out and not see something and go on to see something that really is there. So what is it that I'm supposed to not be seeing? So that would be your ideas of sin and guilt, your projections onto other people. You're not supposed to be seeing them. You're supposed to look past them and not see them in other people or in yourself. But here's the thing, illusions are not just inside your mind in your projections onto the world. Illusions are also out there. The world is an illusion. There's parts in the Course talking about the body's eyes and how the body's eyes can only see illusions. They were made not to see reality, so they're fixated on seeing illusions, and that means they can't see anything else other than illusions. The body's eyes look at the outside surface of physical objects, which are illusions, forms of error, and fail to look past it. And Jesus actually describes that physical objects, forms, are the granite block of sin, which the body's eyes cannot see past. So we're not just talking now about, okay, there's some belief in sin in my mind, and I'm projecting it onto the world, and I need to not see that projection on top of the world. I need to undo my belief in sin so that I don't project it onto the world. But the world itself is showing a picture of sin. Physical forms are the idea of separation. The body's eyes are fixated on only looking at the illusion that something is there that isn't really there. And that doesn't just mean my projections onto the physical stuff that's outside me. It actually literally means including the things themselves. The physical objects are themselves part of projection and part of perceiving, and they are things that I'm projecting on top of heaven. So it's not just, okay, there's the earth and I'm projecting stuff onto the earth. The earth is a projection being projected onto God's world, heaven. And so that means that the physical world is itself an idea of sin. The body is the idea of sin made flesh. And the body's eyes are made to look upon sin and not see past it. So that's meaning that even built into the way the body sees, it looks at the surface of objects and doesn't look past them, because it's actually looking at sin. So physical objects are pictures of sin. They're pictures of crucifixion. And so when you forgive, you aren't just working on taking away layers of projected sin that you've put on top of the physical objects, at some point you're going to strip all that away and then start realizing the objects themselves are sin that you're projecting. Got a bit of a cold at the moment, which I'm trying to undo. So I might sound a little bit weird. Hopefully I don't spew on you. So forgiving and forgiveness has this quality that it overlooks, it looks past something. So let's say the body's eyes are looking at a surface, and I see, okay, there's a car or there's a house or whatever. My vision stops at the surface of nothing, because they're not really there. They're nothing. The world is not real. But my body's eyes will stop at the surface and say, that's where the stopping point is. I'm looking at the surface, and I'm blinded by the sight of form. I'm blinded by the surface, and I can't see past sin, the granite block of sin that looks physical and solid and impossible. It is the world you see that is impossible. And because my sight is stopping at a certain point, it isn't extending in an unlimited way, like extension of creation. It's coming to a stop. And I'm failing to overlook. So the body's eyes are unforgiving. They are the idea of not forgiving sin. And so when you're looking at physical objects and surfaces and you're saying, I really do see something there, there's a real thing, you're deceived by sight of form, and you're not being forgiving. To forgive the forms of error, which are physical objects in your big mind, ideas in your mind, you have to find a way to that your seeing doesn't stop at the physical surface. It doesn't get distracted by the illusion that there's something there that isn't there, that the physical object isn't really there, but you believe in it so much that it looks solid and physical. If you're not going past the surface and you're falling for the illusion, you're believing that there really is something there that you're looking at. So what you got to realize is there's kind of two illusions. One is that the world itself is an illusion. And the second thing is that on top of that illusion, you keep projecting more illusions about the illusion that causes you not to recognize that it's an illusion. So when you have false perception, what it means is that you are mistaken about what is true and false. You've mixed them up, and you think that illusions are real and reality is an illusion. So that means you're looking at an illusion, but you're looking at it in an illusory way that converts it into what seems like reality. And so now you're looking at something that's not there and believing that it is there. That is false perception. It is being mistaken about what you're seeing. You think something exists that doesn't exist. And that's how the ego sees, and it's how the body sees. So the body's looking at stuff that's not real, stuff that isn't there, and registering it as if it's really there. It's false. That's false perception. It's being deceived by sight of form. You're blinded. The body's eyes were made so that you don't see. They were made so that you would fixate on the surface see these reflected photons of light and think that that stuff is really there, when in fact it doesn't exist. There is no world. It's quite deceiving. So you got to be careful when the Course is talking about you have illusions about the world, and don't try to change the world, but change your mind about the world. You can come to think that that means the only place where there are illusions is inside me, and my misperceiving is where all the illusions are. That's where all the distortion's happening, and everything outside is not an illusion. That is not correct at all. Your misperceptions are an example of an illusion. You are deluded about something, but the thing that you're deluded about is also an illusion. An illusion is something that seems to be true that is false. Something that seems to be real that isn't real. It means that you don't recognize it for what it is. You're not seeing it correctly, and you think it's something that it's not. And this physical world, Earth, is not what it appears to be. It is not really a planet. It doesn't really exist. It's actually just a pretend image that's being projected in the mind that the body was made to look at as if it cannot see anything else, so that you would dream of it and immerse yourself in it and hide in it and be blinded by it, so you see it all around you as if it's really there, so that you would not see heaven. It was designed to block your awareness. Physical forms are blocks to awareness in your mind. So now blocks to awareness are not just the stuff in here that I'm not seeing the world properly. The world is a block to awareness. And part of what you're putting onto the world in your projecting is everything that turns this illusion into something real. All of the sense that there really is something out there is your illusion, is your misperception. You're seeing something that's not there as if it is. So if it comes down entirely just to your misperceiving, your illusions about whatever, and you correct all of those illusions, you're not going to see the world anymore, because it's not there. And you don't realize how much you are making it seem to exist. You think that, okay, the world is so real and convincing and objectively there that I'm just misperceiving it, and if I would stop misperceiving it, I'll see it correctly. And it's still going to have grass and trees and houses and people, and I'm going to love it to bits, and it's going to still be a world, and I'm still going to perceive it, but now it's going to be lovely. But that's failing to realize the extent of your denial and your misperceiving, and how you've turned reality into an illusion, and just how much your mind makes this world look like it exists. And when you get fully corrected and you're having Christ vision, you're going to barely even acknowledge that there is anything out there at all. Projection makes perception. You are literally projecting the planet and then perceiving it and thinking that it's there, and when you stop projecting it, you're not going to perceive it anymore. So getting back on topic, forgiveness overlooks. So forgiveness looks at an illusion, sees the illusion, and recognizes it for what it is, and is not deceived, and can tell the ways that it's trying to trick you, the temptation. The world was made to try to tempt you to believe that the world is there, to try to tempt you to believe that sin is happening and it's become solid and real and impassable, and physical objects are like the demonstration that you can't go past sin. Your forgiveness is not supposed to keep looking at the sin and not see past it. Your forgiveness isn't supposed to look at the world and sort of say, oh, world, I love you so much, and I'm going to stop hating you, and I'm going to love you. Still blinded by sight of form, still looking at the surface of objects, still believing that an illusion is reality, trying to keep the world, to make it real, to believe your eyes, believing that there's a world there that doesn't exist, and trying to at the same time believe that I'm loving it and I like it and I want it and it's holy and it's been forgiven and therefore it's innocent and I want to keep it. It doesn't happen. If you're doing forgiveness, that can't happen, because your forgiveness is literally going to move your mind past the surface of physical objects and see past sin. If you're not seeing past sin, you haven't forgiven. You've got to learn that there is no sin and sin hasn't happened. That means there is no world. The body's eyes look upon the forms of error, which are sins, and they were made only to fixate on sin and make it real as physical forms, which are thought forms in the big mind. If you're still looking at them and trying to frickin' have them at the same time as have love, you're trying to have your cake and eat it. The ego is trying to keep the world real, trying to keep it blinding, trying to keep it something that you want, while trying to tell you that, oh yes, I love it so much that I've forgiven it and it's great and wonderful. That is a spiritualization of a dream, and it means that you're still deceived and you haven't overlooked the illusion. You haven't realized the ways that you're being tempted, you've been deceived, and you're not seeing. To forgive is to have Christ's vision and to see reality, which is heaven, beyond the illusion of there being a sin. Literally seeing through and past the surface of physical forms to reality that is beyond it and hidden by it. If your actual way of seeing isn't doing that, you're not really seeing with forgiveness. Forgiveness overlooks it. It fails to see bodies. It fails to see the world. And it looks past those distractions and sees something more real on the other side of it. So you could think, okay, if I'm going to do a forgiveness and I'm going to forgive somebody, you sort of assume there's a given, the person is there, they exist, they're a body, you're going to forgive them, and take off their shoulders the guilt that you put on them, blah, blah, blah. Try to see them as innocent, but you're still going to keep their body and still see the body. That isn't a complete forgiveness. You're still blinded by the perception that they have a body, that the body that they have is succeeding in keeping you from seeing their soul. You're not seeing their Christ self because you're blinded by the surface of their form, and so you haven't really fully forgiven them yet. Your seeing has to go past the surface in order to join with their mind, in order for you to not have a separation between you and the person. If the body shows up to you and you see it and you look, if your sight stops at the surface of the body and you still think, I'm seeing that person because I'm seeing their body, you are mistaken and you're blinded and you're in the separation. And that means that now you see a body because you still believe in sin, and so you're still seeing a sinful body. To see a sinless body is impossible. Either you see bodies because you believe in sin, or you do not see bodies because you believe in innocence. Jesus said, "You the man." To forgive is to overlook. So it can't be that you kind of keep the thing that you were forgiving. You can't keep it. You have to actually undo it and remove it from your sight, so that you no longer even see it and you don't even believe it exists anymore. That's what forgiveness means. So let's talk about what is a forgiven world. The forgiven world that you look upon with forgiving eyes. What is that? You could be mistaken in thinking that that means I'm going to look at the world and see the world and not see anything past it and see the form of the surface of the objects and regard them as innocent, believing that separate objects are somehow not separate, or they're unified by some kind of underlying reality, but to still basically think in terms of, I'm still looking at the world and my vision is still stopping at the surface of the objects, but I'm having loving thoughts about the surface objects, and I'm still seeing separate bodies and separate people and buildings and cars, and supposedly at the same time as being forgiving. That is not how you see a forgiven world. If you're going to see this world as forgiven, you have to look through the world and past the world. The Christ vision looks through surfaces like X-ray vision and sees beyond the illusory appearance that forms are true, and disregards them, doesn't believe that they're true, recognizes that they're false, acknowledges that they're lying and that the forms are actually illusions, and doesn't buy into them. That is what it means to forgive, to see the forgiven world. It's not, I'm confronted with an image still, and I'm looking at the image, and my sight is stopping at the image, but I'm looking at it with love. That must be special love, because you're not overlooking. You're not forgiving. If you see that, it means that you still have an investment in keeping illusions looking real to you and believing that they are somehow holy and innocent. So the world is forgiven because you overlook it. The world is forgiven because you do not invest in it. The world is forgiven because you no longer believe in it. It's forgiven because you're no longer deceived by its illusions. It's forgiven because it's barely even registering into your perception, and it's just a thin veil over the face of Christ, and the face of Christ has become very strong, and you're seeing that much more than you're seeing forms. To see a forgiven world is to recognize that the world is meaningless, that its forms don't mean anything. Workbook lesson number 1, nothing I see means anything. Nothing the body's eyes see, physical objects that all look separate, do not have any meaning. God would not create a meaningless world, therefore God did not create the world of forms where things are separated out in bodies. Some people actually think that means that the world must be meaningful. Because God doesn't create a meaningless world, the world must therefore be meaningful. That's completely bullshit. There's my bullshit number 1 for this video. Absolutely back to front, denial of the fact that it's saying that this world is meaningless, nothing I see means anything, and therefore it is not created by God. God would not create a meaningless world that I see, that I'm seeing. He didn't create this. So if you're going to be forgiving, you have to come to learn that all forms are meaningless. All objects are meaningless. All bodies are meaningless. Earth doesn't mean anything. And meaning is beyond form. The content is beyond the form. And you only want to look at the content. You're not interested in the form. To forgive this world doesn't mean I'm going to fall in love with the world and fall in love with animals and fall in love with human bodies and sunsets and all this shit. Thinking that if I would see what seems to be real in a loving way, that is being spiritual. That is being blinded by sight of form. That is denial. That is not sight. It's not the vision of Christ. This world is forgiven because it's a mistake. Jesus talks about how the body can only look at the form of error. All the things that it sees are error, which means the earth is an error. The body can only look at illusions. The body can see the earth, therefore the earth is an illusion. If the earth was real, the body would not be able to see it. That's a fact. Where was I going with that? Forms of error. So the body looks on the forms of error, and the errors that have been made are mistakes in perception. The errors that have produced trees and houses and cars are mistaken thoughts, which originally were thoughts of sin, but are being reinterpreted as just mistaken. The Holy Spirit will undo all the consequences of my wrong decision if I'll let him. He undoes the mistakes. The mistakes are forgivable. So I have to realize that this world isn't really sinning. It is just mistaken. And the mistake can be corrected. That means the world can be corrected. And that correction undoes illusions, undoes the world. So if my body can only see the form of error and it's fixated on sin and physical objects as sin, and I need to learn to be forgiving and overlook sin and not believe that sin is really there, I need to learn how not to see the world, to overlook its appearances, to look past the bodies, to see the Christ that is beyond the physical form. Your brother's reality is Christ, and if you see his body, you do not see him. So you got to learn that this world was just a mistake, and so you see it in a forgiving way, and you're not sort of like condemning the world and saying, "You freaking sinful world, I hate you." You're not trying to like demonize the world or put it down or punish it by saying this. You're not supposed to have grievances towards the world, but that doesn't mean the world is real just because you're not having grievances about it. It means that you're now recognizing that it's just mistaken. It's just an error in belief where you believed that you could make a world opposite God's without his will. And you haven't really done so. You're dreaming that you have, you're pretending that you have, and you are mistaken in that pretending. You cannot do the sin that you thought you did. So you haven't really succeeded in making a world opposite God's. So it's not really there. And there is no world. And therefore, if you forgive this world and find it to be innocent, you must be no longer believing in it. No longer falling for its temptation, no longer being deceived by its illusions and its appearances, looking past it, overlooking it, seeing beyond it. And heaven is beyond the earth. It is being hidden by the earth. The earth is a block. It's like if the earth wasn't here, you would immediately see heaven. Because heaven is here, and the earth has been sort of shoved in front of your face to try to stop you seeing it. So forgiving the world is not about still believing the world's real. It's not about I still see it. It's not about I love bodies. It's not about I want to save the animals. It's not about keeping the dream going. It's not about making the dream real. It's not it's kind of like Jesus talks about leaving the desert. The only sensible thing is to get out. Here's a big block of sin that is the world. Your body is fixated on it and obsessed with it. You basically just need to stop looking at it and look at heaven and have heaven be the only thing you want to see, so that you never see that shit ever again and it just disappears and you forget about it. Tiny Mad Idea was when you forgot to laugh and you forgot who you were, and you need to remember, and that means you need to forget the world. So forgiveness is forgetting the world. because it's a dream, and there's no point in even remembering a dream. It's over. The world is over long ago. So in your becoming forgiving, if your forgiving doesn't include, I recognize that this world is an illusion and it's not true and it's not real, then you're in denial and you're trying to keep the world and trying to make the body real, and you're not willing to let it go. This world is not your home. It's not like God, and it's not what God created. So to forgive it doesn't mean I like it. It doesn't have to mean that you want it, or that it's still there, or that you're even still supposed to be seeing it. You're supposed to be getting to sort of training yourself not to see the world, so that you can have your other kind of vision and see heaven. You cannot see two worlds. You can't see both this world and heaven. You cannot behold the world and know God. So sight of one is costing you vision of the other. So you got to choose, which world do I want to see? I can't see both of them. So your forgiveness is supposed to make you emphasize that sight of heaven is what you want to focus on, and you want to see less of the world. The world diminishes in your sight to such a point that it disappears. The world spins into the nothingness from which it came, because it becomes so insignificant in your correct perception of it. You've recognized just how everything in the world is little because it's made of littleness, just how irrelevant it is. The purpose of the body is to teach you of the body's ultimately unnecessary. The purpose of the world is to teach you that the world isn't really there. This is the Holy Spirit's repurposing of what you made. If you're going to look with forgiveness with Him upon this world, it really means I'm going to look past this world with Him by not giving this world any truth and not believing it, and making it become transparent and then making it disappear. That is forgiveness. It is not about keeping the world real, staying in bodies, and loving heaven on earth. Heaven and earth cannot both be seen at once. The earth does not become heaven, and you should not want it to, because this world is nothing like the nature of heaven, and it's not fit for you. The laws of this world go against your nature. It's impossible not to have stress and strain in this world because it goes against your nature. You're like a fish out of water here. It doesn't suit you. You're not well adapted to this world. Heaven is your home. It's where you belong. It's your natural environment, as God intended, and God created it for you. And then you went and tried to make another world, and now you're obsessed with this other world, and you're trying to forgive it and half keep it and half let it go, and it's kind of all or nothing. This world holds nothing that I want. It takes great learning to both realize and accept that the world has nothing to give, that there's nothing in the physicalness of this world that you want, and you want heaven, and heaven is all you want, and only the truth is true. Heaven remains your one alternative to the strange world you made. You can't make this world spiritual. It doesn't have spirit in it. It's an illusion. If you try to make this world into heaven, you're spiritualizing a dream. We've been trying to make it into heaven for freaking millennia, and it's not possible because it's not heaven. It can't stay as a 3D world and be heaven. Heaven would dissolve it because space-time is an illusion that opposes the nature of reality, and the two cannot coexist. So it's like either you have this weird world or you have heaven's world, and they're totally opposite. You cannot combine them, so you're going to have to choose between them. And the belief that you can combine them will make you stuck, and it will make you stuck in the body, making the world real and thinking that this world can be your home and it's what God intended for you and it's where you should hang out. It's a trap. Don't fall for the trap. Just because you're forgiving of the world may make the world's form seem beautiful and lovely and happy or whatever. Don't stop there, because if you fall for the temptation to believe that that is its true nature and that it's not an illusion and that you're seeing reality and therefore you want to keep it, now you're back in the ego and you're back in illusions and you haven't woken up. The body must go. The world has to go. You have to learn to overlook it, and it's like a kind of the granite block of sin covering the face of Christ as a physical layer of flesh and bones and rocks and whatever that was put there so that you wouldn't see what's on the other side. If you want to see God, you've got to get the shit out of the way. God is beyond the world because God is in my mind. So there we go. To forgive is to overlook. The overlooking is absolutely vital, otherwise it's not forgiveness. It's not the old school forgiveness where you have an argument with somebody that seems real and then you sort of forgive them and they still seem real. That is not forgiveness. Forgiveness has to undo something that you thought was real that isn't real, so that there's less belief in illusions. The illusions are disappearing, and the things that you thought were real are being turned into illusions and disappearing. That is forgiveness. If they're not disappearing, you're not done with forgiving. The world must disappear in your Christ vision so that you no longer see or believe in or give any credit to this illusion. If you don't think this world is an illusion, it's because you are deceived by it and you think it's real. That's why you are not been done with your forgiveness yet. Blinded by sight of form, that's what that is. If you think this world is real, you are blinded by sight of form and you have not forgiven it. And you can only go so far in your forgiving of the world that keeps the world real. You're going to hit a ceiling where you can no longer, you're kind of like, I want this and I want this, and I can't go any higher without letting this go. So if you, at some point, you have to realize I can't go any further unless I start to let go of the world. Can't go any further unless I'm willing to look past bodies. Jesus says, together we will watch the world disappear. all the sun and the stars and all the planets disappear into the blinding light. The universe ends. This universe is going to disappear when all of the sons of God have returned to the sonship and recognize that there is no further need for this illusion. And that's why Jesus' body disappeared, because he had no illusions about it. He didn't believe in it. The world will disappear when you have no illusions about it. And all that remains is heaven, which is God's creation, which is not like this world. And it's here now, but you're not seeing it because you're distracted by all this physical shit. And even literally. Anyway, I'm just rambling on. Rambling man. So, to forgive is to overlook. To overlook is to look past and through as if you have X-ray vision and no longer see what you were seeing before you forgave. And that includes the stuff you were projecting, includes the stuff that you are thinking is in your mind and not out there, and it includes the outside world, which is a vast illusion, a very convincing illusion that isn't really there. There is no world. Yes. Only the truth is true. God bless and bye-bye.